So I guess we should begin. Now, the other Shir Daf Yomi, they finished actually towards the bottom of the page, and the base on the base. That's Motzei Shabbos, Kedesh Parshas Vayetze, and today's Daf is Daf Chav Gimel. We will begin Daf Chav Beis on the base in the middle of the page, where we have an argument between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion that when your fire travels from where you put it down onwards and you're not touching it or anything else, it's considered like your arrow, your force. Isha Mishum Chetziai, it's like your force that is moving and is traveling, and therefore you are chayiv. And Reish Lakish says that no, it's like your possessions. Just like your possessions you're responsible for, so too are you responsible for the fire that left you. And that's why you are chayiv. So we're going through different cases. We're trying to understand. We already gave a few differences. We said, for example, that if you light a fire, the fire travels on its own and kills somebody. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you are liable for murder because it's as if you killed that person. According to Reish Lakish, it's like your animal killed the person. And when your animal kills a person, you're not chayiv misa, you're not liable, you don't get capital punishment, and you have to pay kafir compensation and so on. So there are a number of differences. So Toshma, in the middle of the page. Hashaleach es habir. We already had this Gemara Daf test. Hashaleach es habir. If somebody sends a fire, b'yad chedesh shot v'katan. It was reckless on your part. You gave a fire to an immature person. Someone's a shaita, a child, minor, and obviously something happened, and they set fire to something. In a court of law, you would not be held liable because you only caused the damage. You didn't actually set the fire. You gave it to a cotton, and the cotton is the one who set the building on fire. So you caused it. For cause, we cannot punish you in a court, but chayiv din shemayim. But as a religious person, you have to compensate them. You chayiv din shemayim. Says the Gemara. Let's understand. Why are you potter? The one who said that it's like your arrow. Well, so whose arrow is it? It was the chedesh who had the fire last, and the fire traveled from him. So therefore, it's the force who actually lit the fire, who we consider who actually, propelled the fire into the next property. That was the cotton. Fine, the chedesh. The one who said that it's like your possession and you are responsible, you need to take care of your possessions. Then what would happen if you gave your cow, your ox, you gave it to a child to mind, and the ox ran rampant and caused damage? Won't we hold the owner of the ox responsible? So why should the fire be any different? It's your possession, and you were reckless. You gave it to a child. So doesn't that prove that Rabbi Yochanan is right? Says the Gemara, didn't we learn? The very same Reish Lakish understood this halacha differently. Didn't we learn? Is talking about what you gave to this miner or to the shaita was not an exposed fire. It was a piece of coal, but there was a fire burning inside, but there's no real fire there. And then what happened was that the chedesh himself, or the cotton, fanned the fire, and eventually a fire came out. So who produced the fire? It wasn't the original person. It was this child, or this chedesh, and so on, which is very different than an ox. The ox itself was ready to do the damage straight away. You had no right to give it to the child. Over here, what you gave to the chedesh was a coal, and the fire wasn't really exposed, wasn't revealed. But Rabbi Lakish agrees. If you gave an open flame, and then chayiv, of course you're chayiv. My time of why? Because body is acre, definitely there'll be damage. And therefore, it's just like your possessions, you have to make sure that they don't cause damage. However, Rabbi Yochanan says, Afilu shalhev is potter. Rabbi Yochanan says that even a flame, even if you gave him a flame, is potter. You know why? Because whose arrow is it? It's the child, like we said before. It's the child who propelled the fire, and therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, adult is potter. Rabbi Yochanan holds, tzavsa the chedesh kagorim. It's the fact that the chedesh is holding on to it that caused it. When we'll hold you responsible if you gave a fire to a child, not just you gave him a fire, the fire traveled on its own. If you gave him all the tools that he needs to start a fire, and it's as if therefore it was your koyach that did all of it. Adamasle Gavli gave him a dry piece of wood, and Silsa you gave him small twigs, and a candle and a match, and you gave everything to him. Omar Cross says the Pasha. Omar says, so what's the basis of Rabbi Yochanan? kro umasnita misayela. He has a pasuk supports him and a brisa. That fire. The idea of fire is that I just light it in point A, and the fire travels on its own. So it's very different than anything else that that causes damage. If my possessions cause damage, or I personally, this is sort of in between. I lit the fire, but then it travels on its own. So Rabbi Yechon says it's a continuation of what I started, so therefore it's as if I'm doing it the whole way. And the Shlokhi says, no, the moment it left your hand, you're no longer involved. It's like your possessions, and you're responsible for it. So we have a pasuk supporting Rabbi Yechon. It says, "Kiseitze eish teitze ma'atzma." The fire goes out on its own. The pasuk says, no, the fire. That's what happened. Fire travels. It says there, "Yishalim hamavir es havara," that the person who lit it should be responsible, and we call it mavir, the one who's keeping the fire continue. So the fact that we say the one that we continue the fire continue sounds like clearly that the person is constantly involved with the fire. And that's the famous question we discussed. The Mukti says, so how can you light a candle Friday night if every second you're involved in the fire, it's as if it's burning into Shabbos? And therefore Mukti says, no, as soon as you lit it, it's as if the whole fire happened at that moment. That fire is just like an arrow. What's the brisa? Tanya the brisa. Pasach the Torah starts off beniskim amoined. It starts off talking about damage of your possessions. It says, the fire. If the fire went out and you send your animal into the other property, it talks about your money. You send your animal in to go destroy the property. And then it concludes, it says, Hamavir, that you're the one who did it personally. I will tell you that fire is just like your arrow, just like Rabbi Yechon. So it says the Gemara, an interesting Gemara here, Rava is going to quote a question that Abaya asked, and how Abaya answered the question, and Rava seems to be very impressed. Amar Rava says, Rava, Kashil el Abaya. Abaya had the following question. Every form of mazik has a stringency, but also has a leniency. So, for example, shen and regel. The animal consumes things because it enjoys it. Regel, this is how it walks, it tramples, and so on. The stringency is that you pay the full amount of damage the very first time. Leniency, only if it took place in the property of the victim, not if it took place in a public place. That's the leniency. Karen, the behavior acted in an erratic way, not the normal way, and intention is to cause damage. And when it comes to Keren, the leniency is you only pay half the nezek. The stringency is you pay it regardless of where it took place. Even in a Shusarabim, you pay. The Aish. Boyer, the same thing. Boyer has a stringency that even in a public place you have to pay, and you pay the full amount. The leniency is shoyd v'la adam. If a person falls in and gets hurt, you don't have to pay. They should have been more careful. Chamoid v'la kelim. If the kalim fall off the chamor, you don't have to pay for that. So that's the leniency. When it comes to Aish, there's a leniency as well. What's the leniency by Aish? That if you light a fire and at the time it wasn't exposed, certain things were buried underground, it's called tamun, hidden. And then the area caught fire and ruined whatever it was underground, you don't have to pay. Either we learn from a Gezeres HaKosov, the pasuk says kama, anything which is growing, or because it's an einus, it's totally not your fault. It's not your fault. How you didn't know that it existed there, so it's called an einus. So our problem is going to be as follows. When does tamun, tamun works by fire, but if a person, for example, causes damage to another person, even if things, let's say, I punch you, and you had inside your pocket, you had something valuable, and I crushed it, I'm responsible. Even though it's tamun, I had no idea it was there, I'm responsible. So there's no tamun when it comes to an individual person. It's only when your possessions cause damage. So since we know that tamun is an exemption when it comes to fire, and Rabbi Yechon holds that a fire is like the person is doing the damage, so what is exactly, how's that possible? If Aish is the person, and by a person that doesn't apply tamun, because the person is responsible even for things that you weren't aware of, even for the oinus, so when are you patur from tamun? According to Lakish, that it's your possession. So every form of mazik has an exemption. So Aish has an exemption of tamun. But according to Rabbi Yechon, that Aish is just an extension of the person, as if the person is continuing with the fire. So why are you patur from tamun? That's a biased question. Amar Rabba, catch that by biased question. The man, the one that says Isha Mishum Chetzeh, that fire is like your arrow. Tamun be'Aish, the patur achmana. Tamun by fire, with the Torah says you're exempt. Heichim ishkachazla. How can it happen? So Abaya comes along like this. And I'm going to tell you the conclusion of the Gemara. So we're jumping ahead a little bit, but you'll understand. The Gemara is going to say that, the following scenario. According to Rabbi Yochanan, what happens, it's no longer your chait, it's no longer your arrow, but the fire still continues. Are you responsible or not? What do you mean? For example, the two properties side by side. Called property on the right side, property A, property on the left side, property B. And there's a wall, a partition between them. When I lit the fire in property A, the fire was only going to reach the wall and no further. So therefore, anything that happens between where I lit the fire and that wall is my energy, is me. So that's my arrow, that's my chayes. But then what happened was, after I lit the fire, this wall collapsed, unrelated to the fire. So I didn't cause that to happen. So now the fire continues traveling into property B. But at the time I lit it, there was no reason for it to go to property B. There was a wall standing there. So as soon as it comes to the second property, the chayes is over. It's no longer me doing it and all that. So what is it? It's now my possession. So Rabbi Yochanan will agree with Reish Lakish that sometimes fire is like your possession, but usually it's because it's your arrow. And what's the difference? Because when it's by the law, if fire is like your possession, then there's an exemption called tamun. If fire is like an arrow, there's no exemption. So Rabbi Yochanan will say, in property A, there's no tamun. But in property B, after the wall collapsed, over there, tamun will be exempt because it's your possession like any other mazik, and there's exemptions, and that's the exemption. That's what I was going to say here. Says the Gemara, Abai was happy because a fire fell into that courtyard. And then the wall collapsed. Not because of your fire, and then the fire continued traveling. It's caused damage in the next one. The husband over there, over there, we say that the chayes, the arrow, ended at this wall. And now that it continues traveling, it's no longer the chayes, it's now merely your possession. As the Gemara will explain. If you're telling me it's no longer my arrow, the Gemara right now thinks that the only reason why you're responsible is because it's your arrow. You shouldn't be liable at all. So the Gemara concludes, Abaye said, Ella, but Leman, the Islay Mishum Chetzyoy, Islay Nami Mishum Amoina. Rabbi Yochanan agrees that sometimes fire is like your possessions. When? In this case, where the wall collapsed, and you could have prevented the fire from going into property B. You could have mended the wall very quickly, run ahead and put the wall back up, and you didn't. So now you're responsible. The Hasam Shayrihu, it's like your animal that you didn't close the door in front of the animal goes cause damage, you're responsible. So now the Gemara wants, so therefore what? Rabbi Yochanan agrees in principle with Reish Lakish that your fire is like your possession. He just adds, over and above that, it's also like your arrow. So the Gemara now wants to know, so what's the argument then? Says the Gemara, if so, is my benayu, since they both now agree that it's your possession, Rabbi Yochanan is only adding it's your arrow, my benayu, what's the difference? Says the Gemara, you know what the difference is? The chayvay ba'arba dvarim. We know there are many differences, like we learned yesterday. What happens if you light a fire, the fire travels and kills somebody? According to Rabbi Yochanan, you're charged with murder because you killed him. According to Reish Lakish, it's like your cow killed him, so you're not charged with murder. You just have to pay compensation. So there are a lot of differences. But the Gemara wants to hone in on like another difference in a normal case. You know what the difference is? When an animal damages a person, all you have to do is pay for the damage, nothing else. If a man damages another person, there are 5 different payments you have to pay. Nezek, the damage, Tsar, the pain, Ripui, the medical bills, and Sheva is the fact that the person is unemployed, and Baisha, shame. So if you light a fire and the fire goes and causes damage to another person, you have to pay 4 things. You don't pay Baishas, because Baishas is only if you did it deliberately. I did it to humiliate you. Here you didn't. Your little fire just travels on its own. But you pay for the other 4 things. And therefore, that is the difference of Reish Lakish. You pay for those 4 different kinds of payments, and according to Reish Lakish, you don't. The Muki Yeshiv here talks a little bit about that the reason why you pay for the 4 things it's like when you lit the fire, it could have gone anywhere. It's like a pshia. Afterwards, the fire traveled on its own, and perhaps you couldn't do anything about it. It's too late. So it's like an oinus, but then when it caused damage. And we learned before that if you're starting out being negligent and then it turns an oinus, it's your fault, too bad. So he wants to know, how is that different than the case? If a guy, we're going to learn that if a guy has puts a rock in his pocket, and then a stone, a pebble in his pocket, he walks down the street, it falls out of his pocket, there's a hole, falls on somebody and breaks, or falls on a vase and breaks it, or falls on a person, and hurts the person. So the Gemara says, you don't have to pay for the four things. And he asked, but why isn't that chilose b'pshia v'seifer ba'inus? You put it in your pocket, you could have caused all kinds of damage, and then afterwards, in the end, you forgot about it, so it became an inus. It wasn't your fault, but you should be obligated, like over here. So he makes a very important rule, which is negate to halacha l'maisa. Just interesting to see how halacha is so interconnected. So he rules that since when you put the pebble in your pocket, you could have taken it right out, so it wasn't negligent. And then afterwards, you forgot all about it. We separated two cases. Putting the pebble in your pocket, you put it in, that ends that story, because you could have taken it out, no problem. Then when you walked outside and you forgot about it, before you walked outside, you totally forgot about it, that's a nuke story. And there's no pshia there, you totally forgot. What am I getting at? The law is, if you forgot to daven mincha, you can daven ma'ariv twice. If you forgot to daven shachris, you can daven mincha twice, provided it wasn't pshia, it wasn't negligent. If you were negligent and you didn't daven, you can't make it up. So what happens? It's 1:30 in the afternoon. You could daven mincha. You say, mincha I could daven until 7 o'clock. What's the rush? But then later on, you got caught up in other things and you totally forgot. How do we view that? Is that called a pshia because you had time, you could have done it, and you were just procrastinating? Or do we say, but later when you should have davened, you just forgot, so you're an einus? So based on this, the Muki Yosef, who brings from the Rameh, he wants to say that that's considered an einus, even though you could have davened before and you had plenty of time, you had no excuse not to, but you said, I have plenty of time, what's the rush? So then, if later on it turned to be an accident, we would treat it like an einus, and you could make up that davening. The Muki Yosef himself is not happy with that, but he brings two opinions. All revolves around the question that we asked, the difference between that case and this case here. So you just see how halacha works. Okay, let's move on. The Gemara says, "Ala charara mishalef." The dog went ahead and took a biscuit, and there was a piece of coal attached to it. And the dog took out the biscuit and lit, a pile of grains. So for the biscuit, he has to pay 100% because he's enjoying it. That's like Shane. And for the godish, for the pile, he pays only half a nezik. Rabbi Yechon explained, because it's like the arrow, the energy, that's tzroiris of the dog. And tzroiris, you pay only half a nezik. And Rish Lakish holds that no, you only pay, you pay for what do you call it? When you put down you put the fire down at a certain place, you pay chatzi nezik for that. But when the fire travels, you're totally potter. Why? Because it's not your money. Remember, Rashi holds that when are you obligated to pay for fire? It's your possessions, but it has to belong to you. This piece of coal belongs to the owner of the biscuit, the owner of the cookie, and therefore you're not chayiv. So according to Rashi understanding, Rish Lakish holds that for the godish, the pile, you're exempt. It's not your fire. You only pay for placing the coal down on the ground, and for that, you pay You pay half a nezik. And why? Because that's where the coal fell down, and that's the traders. It fell down. Okay. So says the Gemara. Says the Gemara. Man chayiv. Who? It says that you have to pay for the fire. Who has to pay? Baal Kelev, obviously the owner of the dog, because the dog is the one who brought the fire over. Says why don't you also hold liable the owner of the coal? Because at the end of the day, the coal was his and he's responsible. Says the Gemara, we're talking about a case here. At least they both should pay jointly. Says the Gemara, we're talking about a case where the guy actually guarded the coal, he had it behind the fence. No, he had it behind the fence. How did the whole story happen in the first place? What's the dog doing with the biscuit and the coal? The dog dug its way under. Now we say the dog dug its way underneath, so therefore it was protected. So the owner of the coal is exempt. The owner of the dog is chayiv, but he's paying the full nezik shen. Must be that it's quite normal for a dog to dig his way, bury his way under the gate. In fact, that's what Gemara says. From here we can learn out. As far as the dog is concerned, even though you have a fence, it's quite common for the dog to dig his way underneath. So therefore, you chayiv for shen, and the dog is responsible and not the owner of the kol. So Gemara has the ochla hecha. And we had Rashi a few days ago. Rashi learned that the Gemara had a question. What are the main thing? Shen. We say you're only responsible for shen if it happened in the property of the victim. Does it mean that he took it from the property of the victim, or he actually had to eat it in the property of the victim? That's how Rashi learned. Tosfos totally disagrees. He says that everyone says you have to eat it in the place of the victim, and he learns over there. The question was that the thing was rolling out of the private property, and the cow then brought it back in and ate it in the private property. But because it was going out of the private property, is it considered as if it left already, and therefore the cow is not responsible or not? So now the Gemara here talks about that where did the dog eat this biscuit? He just ate it somewhere else outside, some other pile. Like you have to eat in the house of the victim. He ate it at the house of the owner of the biscuit. So Tosfos brings a proof from here, definitely that we look at, we focus at the time of the eating. Where was this animal when he ate it? In the property of the victim, that's considered shen. Now the question is, very interesting question. The animal is standing in the property of the victim. The food goes into the mouth of the animal. If the food goes in the mouth of the animal itself is the mazik. And we know that if the victim goes into the property of the mazik is not responsible because you trespassed. So isn't this trespassing? Because is the mouth of the animal that is causing the damage, is that mouth belong to the cow is causing the damage, so it's considered the property of the mazik, or do we treat it as the property of the nizik because he picked it up in the house of the nizik? Says the Gemara. Tifshad, let's resolve from here. The peat part of the mouth of the cow is treated as if it's the yard of the victim, and that's why you pay. Because if you tell me the mouth of the animal is the chatzra mazik, true, the mazik picked up the food in the property of the nizik. True, he did that, but we don't care where he picked it up. What we care about is where did he eat it. Then lay, then why can't the animal, the owner of the dog, say, my dog's mouth belongs to my dog, and your bread was in my dog's mouth. I don't care that my dog took it, but the fact is that he damaged it when it was in his mouth. So why am I paying you anything at all? Must be that the mouth of the dog, because the dog is standing in the property of the nizik, the mouth is considered as if it's taking place in the property of the nizik. The boy will have a question. The mouth of a potter, is it treated like the nizik's property or the mazik? Now the one has a simple question. He said, I don't understand your question in the first place. If you're going to tell me that the mouth of the dog is considered the property of the mazik, then how do you ever have shen? Shen is when you eat. But you're telling me that every time you eat, the mouth of that's eating belongs to the mazik. So you never have shen. Shen is only if it takes place in the property of the nizik. But how's that possible? Because every time you eat, you have to put it in your mouth. And you tell me that the mouth is considered the mazik. So when I understand your question. You tell me, I don't understand your question in the first place. What are you telling me? How can you ever be shen? How can you ever be shen in the first place? So the Gemara says further, that's not, the Gemara said that doesn't bother me. That doesn't deter me at all. And the Gemara says, why does it deter me? Because I'll give you examples. You can have shen different. Remember, shen doesn't mean eating. Shen means doing things that brings him pleasure. Rubs himself, has an itch against the wall, or tanfa peiz or dirties the fruits for his pleasure. It lies down because it has a scratch. Maskal Mazutra has a question. Babina Kashi Varlagola to we learned in the beginning of the Masechta that shen. How do you know bia b'zdeacha means eating and consuming? So we bring a pasuk Kashi Yevayel Agal Tumay, just like over there at the opening and closing of the mouth. Completes eating whatever they are. So we see that shane is only considered shane if you completely decimate whatever it is that you're destroying. But if the animal's rubbing against the wall, how can that be shane? Or if the animal dirties the fruits, shane means you have to completely consume whatever it is. Says the Gemara, Rabbeinu Amar, the Shav Tzalmi. The problem, this wall had beautiful caricatures on it, beautiful graffiti on it, and the animal, by rubbing itself against the wall, completely erased those drawings, and now it lost value. The whole wall lost value. That's a damage. So completely destroyed. Ravashi says, we're talking about a case over here that it sunk the fruits into the mud. It would lie down on the fruits. There was mud all around. It got sunk in. It's irretrievable. So again, completely destroyed. Says the Gemara, Toshma coming here regarding your question, is it considered the mouth, inside the mouth, the mazik or the nizik? Toshma coming here. Shisa is a kelev. So you have Reuben, Shimon, and Levi. Reuben owns a dog. Shimon is a bystander standing somewhere on the street. And Levi goes and starts inciting the dog, teasing the dog. The dog gets really angry, but instead of attacking Levi, it attacks Shimon and bites Shimon's hand. Shisa is the same as a snake, potter. Levi, as cruel as it may sound, is potter in a Jewish court of law because he only caused the damage to happen. He incited the dog, but the dog was the one who did the damage. So the Gemara asks, man potter, so who's exempt? Mishasa, right? The one who incited potter. But it seems b'chai balakela, but the owner of the dog is responsible. The day the dog bit the other guy's hand. Now, you tell me that inside the dog's mouth is always treated as if it's the chutz of the mazik, as if the victim trespassed by having his hand inside the dog's mouth. Even though the dog grabbed the hand, it doesn't matter where the dog retrieved it from. What matters is the damage happened while it was in the mouth of the dog. Why can't the owner of the dog say to this victim, my boy, Yotcha Bepumi, the cowboy, what in the world is your hand doing in the mouth of my dog? So therefore, doesn't that prove that the mouth of the dog is not considered trespassing? It's not the mazik's property. So anymore, that's no proof. Who said that you decided that the insider is potter, but the owner of the dog is chayv? Maybe they're both potter. They're both exempt. The owner of the dog is exempt because it's a property of the mazik, and what's your hand doing there? Or I'll give you another answer. Who said it's inside the mouth of the dog? The dog opens its mouth wide, and the lips open up very wide, and the teeth, like the fangs, are sticking out. Visarte gave a scratch. Doesn't mean that he put it between the teeth anybody. It took one of the set of teeth and he just scratched the hand. So therefore, it was not inside the mouth. So we have no proof one way or another. Tashma, come in here. Another proof. It says we'll learn later. Hey shich boy esanochosh. What happens? Okay, here's the interesting thing. There's an argument, Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, that a venomous snake. I take this venomous snake and I bring him to you, and I get the snake to give you a bite. How do we understand the relationship between the venom and the snake? One understanding is that the venom is there revealed. It's as if the snake has no choice in it. It's a venomous snake. You take the snake and you put it in someone's hand, you give it a bite, the venom automatically comes out. The snake has no choice. The other way of learning is no, the venom is somewhere concealed inside the snake, and the snake consciously decides to release the venom. And the difference is, if it's a snake that releases the venom, then it wasn't the person holding the snake and brought it over to the person who made it happen. It's the snake itself. And though, if anything, the owner of the snake is liable. But if you learn that the snake has no choice, but the venom is there, and you brought the snake to that person, then you're totally responsible. It's like you're driving a car. If you have an accident, even though the car hit the person, not me, because the car, I'm total control of the car, then it's me. The car is an extension of me. So if this snake has venom revealed in its mouth, then the snake is merely an extension of you. So that's an argument, Rabbi Yehuda Chachamim. So it says as follows: inside the snake, Rabbi Yehuda says, "I want that you are and you kill the person, you're chayiv for murder." And the Chachamim point you. The Chachamim say, "No, you didn't do it. The snake did it." If you analyze it properly, the the logic is aras nochas, the venom of the snake, bain shinavus, between the teeth. It's there, and the snake has no choice. You put the snake in the guy's hand and it gives a bite, the venom automatically comes out. So therefore, the person who brought the snake there is the murderer. Therefore, machish b'sayev, that person who incited the snake, he should be killed with cherev. He gets capital punishment. And the nachash potter, but the snake is exempt. The snake didn't do anything. There's no alternative. But the divrei chachamim, but according to the rabbis, they said he won't be charged with murder because they say aras nachash me'atzma meki. It's the snake that produces the venom, and therefore the snake is the one who caused the damage. Nachash b'skila, the snake will get stoned because it killed the person. Umachish potter, and the insider is exempt. Now the question is very simple. Why? You're going to tell me that the mouth, you're killing the snake. If you're telling me that the mouth of the snake is considered the property of the mazik, the owner of the snake should say, what was your hand doing in my snake's mouth? The snake pulled your hand, so what? But when it came in contact, it was inside its mouth. What's the snake hand doing in the mouth of my snake? Gemara says, no proof. maybe the mouth was considered the hand of the mazik, and maybe you trespassed. But there's in Jewish law, very interesting. If somebody trespasses and gets hurt, I break into your house, I'm a ganef, and I fall through the skylight, I can't have any complaints to you because I trespass. I have no right to be there. But if the person falls through the skylight and kills himself, then you'll be charged with murder. So that's what we're going to answer here. So even though we will, maybe the mouth of the snake is considered the mouth of the mazik, and it's trespassing. But since the snake killed the person, it's considered murder, and the snake has to get crushed. We don't say that. How do I know? The Tanya of the Braisa. Somebody enters the chotzer balabayis without permission. The nocha shesh balabais, and the animal of the balabais went and attacked him. The mace, and this person died. Hashay b'skila will stone the shayr. We will stone the shayr even though you trespassed. But normally, when your animal kills somebody, you have to pay compensation. But in this case, you don't pay compensation because you trespassed. So bailim for my time. Why are you exempt from compensation? Because he says, what in the world are you doing in my property? So why kill the shayr? Let me say my boy is doing in my property. When it comes to murder, we don't use that as, even though it trespassed, doesn't matter. So Gemara now tells the story. How easy they were goats, the Beit Tarbud, the family called Tarbud, and they were constantly causing a loss to Rabbi Yosef. These goats wandered into Rabbi Yosef's properties and were grazing there. He told the student Abaye, do me a favor, Zilgo, tell the owners of these goats, they should take care of them, keep them away from my property. Abaye said, there's no point. Why is no point? Because they'll argue you should put a fence around your property. It's not their problem, it's your problem. So interesting argument in Abaye Rabbi Yosef. Abaye says you have to make sure, do everything possible, not to tempt others to cause you damage, to prevent them from damaging your property. And Rabbi Yosef says, it's not my responsibility, it's your responsibility to take care of your animals. They shouldn't enter my property. So Amalei said, "Am I Azel? Why should I go to Yazlina? I'll go there." Amalei, they'll tell me, "Lig the mag day the ba'ala. Place a fence there. Place a fence there." So big argument Rishonim. What's going on here? Who's right, Abaye or Rabbi Yosef? Taisa says he doesn't believe that Abaye meant the word he said. Interesting Taisa here. Taisa says he doesn't believe for a minute Abaye meant what he said. He just wanted to avoid going to them. He didn't want to learn. He didn't want to go there, so he found a lame excuse not to go. That's Taisa. Most of the Rishonim hold that there is an argument, and then one of the proofs that the halacha is like Rabbi Yosef, we said we'll have more of it that a shepherd is considered a ganef. Every shepherd is considered a ganef because they let the animals graze in other people's fields. Now the question is, if the din is that it's the responsibility of the owner of the field to put a fence, and if there's no fence there, the goats can do whatever they want. So what's the shepherd's fault? Why is the shepherd considered a ganef? The animals are going around, roaming different pastures, and they're grazing. Doesn't that prove the onus is on the shepherd, not on the owner of the property? So it's an interesting discussion we're going to have in the second paragraph in Bava Basra about that you have to take some measures to to isolate your property or to make it whatever to keep it away. But interesting argument in the buyer of whose responsibility is to make sure that things don't happen. So the Gemara continues further. If you, the Gemara asks an interesting question. The God that if Abaye is right that Rabbi Yosef put a fence again, so how can it ever be Shen? There's always a fence there. How can it be? So we answered it before. The dog digs its way under the fence. Or the wall collapsed at night. How in the world was the owner of the property meant to know? And therefore, your animal walks in. He did everything possible. He had a fence. It fell apart. He didn't know. It's the verse Shen. Machriz Rabbi Yosef whenever there's a story, and then whenever there's an interesting law in halacha. If I paskin something, and then tomorrow I have a case related to me about this very matter, I can use the psak I said yesterday for everybody. Say, look, that's what I paskin. But if I never paskin, and now the story comes, and I have a personal interest in this story, I can't paskin anymore because people will say, you're biased. So here we had a story. So Rabbi Yosef was biased about putting up fences. About protecting keep your animals away. So Rabbi Yosef decided to declare in public, even though people generally won't listen to him anymore because they said, "Oh, you have a vested interest." He tried to emphasize it again. So he said, "Mach Rabbi Yosef." Rabbi Yosef made a call. The Salkin Leila, all those are planning to travel to Israel. or the Nachle Tachta, all those who are planning to come back down to Bava. Hani easy the Shukah. They used to have a market day on Mondays and Thursdays. And they used to, the butcher used to hold on to the live goats until Monday or Thursday, because how else are they going to preserve the meat? In those days, they preserved meat by putting a lot of salt on it. So Mondays and Thursdays. It's a hani easy the Shukah, so these goats, the mafsidi, if they go out there and they cause damage, because they would wait, they would let the goats pile up and hold on to them till Monday or Thursday, so that they can have fresh meat and sell it. So masim right, but their animals cause damage to other fields. We're not going to say to the owners of the fields, put fences around them. We're going to tell the owners of the goats. Today with Tlasim, we're going to warn them 2 or 3 times. Itzai, listen, great. V'iloi, if not, Amalei will tell them this is the halacha. Tiv Amasachta, I want you to go ahead and find the place where the butchers get together. The kibbutz, I don't care if it's Tuesday, I don't care if it's Wednesday. I want you to go ahead and shech your animal right now and force them to shech. Because it's their responsibility to make sure the animals don't roam in private property. Not the responsibility of the private property person to put a fence around this place. Mishnah. Okay, Eza Tam Be'eza Mu'ud. You know what Tam is the first few times in a Mu'ud and the next, but what's the Tam and a Mu'ud? Mu'ud, Kol She'idu By Shloisha Yamim. We're going to have a big argument here. A Mu'ud is somebody that was warned 3 times. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it has to be 3 different days. In other words, if it happened 3 times in one day, Rabbi Yehuda says you're not a Mu'ud. Maybe the animal went Meshuggah, had a frenzy, doesn't prove anything. You want to say that now, and we'll see later, there's a big Hakira. What does Mu'ud mean? Does Mu'ud mean the animal changed and became now habitual gore? Or it means that the animal revealed itself who it really is? Always was an habitual gore. Anyway, so 3 consecutive days or 3 different days committed the damage, then we know it's a Mu'ud. The tam, how is there a way possible for a mu'ud to revert itself back to a tam? In other words, it calmed down, became much more docile. There were 3 opportunities for it to gore another animal, and it avoided that 3 different times and 3 different days. That's how it reverts back to a tam. Give it up, Yehuda. Meir says, mu'ud shehi'idu by shloisha pamim. Meir says that a mu'ud is even 3 times on the same day is a mu'ud. The tam, and how do you revert back? If kids play with an animal and it's very tame and doesn't go out goring, then we know the animal reverted. So according to many, Amir holds 3 different days, and the animal avoided goring. That's also a sign that it reverted back to tam. In addition, if children play with it and doesn't gore, a big machlek is showing. What do you mean doesn't gore? It doesn't gore the children, or it doesn't gore another animal. Some say that it means that it doesn't gore another animal. And even though the kids are playing, it doesn't gore another animal. But if it can be that it doesn't gore the children, because people have a special malach that watches over them, and perhaps the cow doesn't